The old hotel loomed before me, its weathered facade a stark contrast to the modern buildings surrounding it. As I approached the entrance, a chill ran down my spine, though I couldn't explain why. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, revealing a dimly lit lobby that seemed frozen in time. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, as if the very walls were holding their breath. At the reception desk, a pale-faced clerk greeted me with a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to the Blackwood Hotel," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you have a reservation?" I nodded, sliding my ID across the polished wooden counter. The clerk's eyes darted nervously as he typed on an ancient computer. The clicking of keys seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet lobby. "Ah, yes, we have you in room 304, he said, hesitating slightly before handing me an old-fashioned brass key. "Third floor, end of the hall." As I took the key, I couldn't help but notice the clerk's hand trembling. He avoided my gaze, quickly busying himself with paperwork. Something about his demeanor made me uneasy, but I chalked it up to late-night jitters. The elevator was out of order, so I lugged my suitcase up the creaking stairs. Each step seemed to groan under my weight, as if protesting my presence. The hallways were narrow, lined with faded floral wallpaper that had seen better days. Flickering sconces cast dancing shadows that seemed to follow me as I made my way to my room. Room 304 was at the very end of the corridor, isolated from the other rooms. As I inserted the key, I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper coming from inside. But when I opened the door, I was greeted only by silence and stale air. The room itself was spacious but outdated. Heavy velvet curtains framed windows that overlooked a moonlit courtyard. An ornate mirror hung above an antique dresser, its surface slightly tarnished. In the corner stood a large wooden wardrobe, its doors slightly ajar. I unpacked quickly, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease. As I settled into bed, the old springs creaking beneath me, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. Sleep came fitfully, filled with strange dreams of shadowy figures and muffled cries. I jolted awake at 3:12 a.m., my heart racing. The room had grown inexplicably cold, my breath visible in the moonlight streaming through the window, and then I heard it, a soft but distinct knocking. It wasn't coming from the hallway or the neighboring rooms. The sound was coming from inside the closet. Frozen in fear, I stared at the wardrobe. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Gathering what little courage I had, I slowly got out of bed, my bare feet touching the ice-cold floor. As I approached the wardrobe, the knocking stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was almost worse. With trembling hands, I reached for the handle. Just as my fingers brushed the cool metal, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I stumbled backward, tripping over my suitcase and landing hard on the floor. The scream faded, replaced by soft, mournful sobbing. It was then that I noticed the old newspaper clipping that had fallen out of my bag. With shaking hands, I unfolded the yellowed paper. The headline made my blood run cold. "Unsolved murder at Blackwood Hotel. Young woman found dead in room 304. The article detailed the gruesome discovery of a woman's body in this very room, decades ago. The case had never been solved, with rumors of a cover-up swirling for years. As I read, the temperature in the room plummeted further and the sobbing grew louder. I looked up from the article and my heart nearly stopped. There, in the mirror, I saw her. A young woman with long dark hair and sad eyes. She was pale and translucent, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. I blinked, and she was gone from the mirror, but when I turned around, she was standing by the window, her ethereal form bathed in moonlight. She raised a spectral hand, pointing at the wardrobe with a look of desperation in her eyes. The closet doors began to rattle violently. I could hear scratching from inside, as if something, or someone, was trying to claw their way out. The ghost's expression changed from sadness to fear, her silent screams urging me to run. But I couldn't move. It was as if an unseen force was drawing me towards the wardrobe. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. The ghost flickered in and out of existence, her face contorting in horror. As I reached for the wardrobe doors, the ghost suddenly appeared right in front of me. She opened her mouth, and this time I could hear her words clearly. "It's not just a memory. It's happening again, and this time you're part of it." The wardrobe doors flew open, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness. I felt myself being pulled in, the ghost's haunting laughter echoing in my ears. I screamed, closing my eyes and bracing for whatever horror awaited me. And then, silence. I opened my eyes to find myself lying on a bench outside the Blackwood Hotel. The morning sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow on the old building. Confused and disoriented, I stumbled to my feet and rushed inside. The lobby was bustling with activity, a stark contrast to the eerie silence of the night before. I approached the reception desk, where a cheerful young woman greeted me with a smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" she asked brightly. I was staying in room 304 last night," I stammered. Something happened." The receptionist's smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion. "I'm sorry, sir, but there must be some mistake. We don't have a room 304. Our hotel only has 2 floors." I felt the blood drain from my face. But I was there. I saw... My voice trailed off as I realized how insane I must sound. The receptionist looked at me with concern. "Sir, are you feeling all right? Would you like me to call someone for you?" I shook my head, mumbling an apology as I backed away from the desk. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a mirror hanging in the lobby. For a split second, I thought I saw her, the ghost from room 304 standing behind me, a sad smile on her face. I blinked, and she was gone. But as I hurried out of the hotel, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed. The line between reality and nightmare had blurred, and I was no longer sure which side I was on. As I walked away from the Blackwood Hotel, I couldn't help but look back one last time. There, in a window on the non-existent 3rd floor, I saw a pale face watching me. And I knew with chilling certainty that my night in room 304 was far from over. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but I can't keep it to myself any longer. It's been weeks since that night, and I still can't shake the feeling of unease that settled deep in my bones. It was just another late-night drive home from visiting my parents, the kind of drive I'd done 100 times before. The roads were empty, stretching out endlessly before me, illuminated only by my headlights and the occasional flicker of stars peeking through the clouds. The radio had long since faded to static, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the steady hum of my car's engine. I'd been driving for hours, the monotony of the highway broken only by the occasional exit sign or lonely gas station. It was nearing midnight when I hit that long, isolated stretch of road that cuts through the dense forest. You know the type, where the trees press in close on either side, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers trying to grab at your car. The darkness seemed to deepen here, swallowing up everything beyond the reach of my headlights. I found myself leaning forward, squinting into the gloom, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a shadow playing at the edge of my vision, but as I drew closer, the figure solidified. A man, standing motionless at the side of the road, arm outstretched in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker. I don't know what possessed me to slow down. Maybe it was the lateness of the hour, or the eerie stillness of the night. Maybe it was just that seeing another person out here, in the middle of nowhere, felt like stumbling across an oasis in the desert. Whatever the reason, I found myself pulling over, the gravel crunching under my tires as I came to a stop. The hitchhiker approached my car with an unsettling calmness. No rush, no urgency in his steps, just a steady, purposeful walk. As he drew closer, I could make out more details. He was dressed simply, jeans, boots, and a worn leather jacket that had seen better days. His face was unremarkable, the kind you'd pass on the street without a second glance. But his eyes, there was something about his eyes that made my skin crawl. I rolled down my window, the cool night air rushing in and raising goosebumps on my arms. "Where you headed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. His reply was so quiet I had to strain to hear it. "Home," he said, his voice as calm and emotionless as his demeanor. "I'm going home." I don't know why, but those words sent a chill down my spine. Still, I found myself unlocking the passenger door. "Hop in," I said, my mouth moving almost of its own accord. "I can take you as far as the next town." He slid into the seat beside me without a word of thanks. The car dipped slightly under his weight, and I caught a whiff of something odd. Not quite decay, but not quite right either. Like wet earth and old leaves. As I pulled back onto the road, I tried to make conversation. "So where's home?" I asked, glancing over at my silent passenger. He didn't look at me, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Not far now," he murmured. "I've been trying to get there for a long time." The way he said it made my blood run cold. I focused on driving, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease in the pit of my stomach. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of tires on asphalt and the whisper of wind through the trees. I'm not sure how long we drove like that. Time seemed to stretch and warp, minutes feeling like hours. I was just about to ask him again where exactly he was headed when I noticed something. Or rather, the absence of something. The weight on the passenger seat was gone. I jerked my head to the right, my heart pounding in my chest. The seat was empty, completely, utterly empty. The hitchhiker was gone. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt on the deserted road. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my seatbelt, practically falling out of the car in my haste to check the back seat, the road behind us, anywhere. But there was nothing, no sign of the hitchhiker. The door hadn't opened. I would have heard it, felt the rush of air. He had simply vanished. I stood there in the middle of the road, the engine still running, my headlights cutting twin beams through the darkness. The forest pressed in around me, suddenly seeming much darker, much more menacing than before. The silence was oppressive, broken only by my ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in disbelief and growing terror. It could have been minutes or hours. Eventually, the cold began to seep into my bones, spurring me back into action. I practically dove back into my car, locking the doors and peeling away from that spot as fast as I dared on the winding forest road. I drove in a daze, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had I imagined it all? Was I so tired that I'd hallucinated a passenger? But no, I could still smell that earthy scent, could still feel the phantom weight on the seat beside me. I didn't stop driving until I saw the flickering neon sign of a gas station, a beacon of normalcy in the surreal night. I pulled in, my hands shaking as I cut the engine. The fluorescent lights of the store were harsh after the darkness of the road, making everything seem too bright, too real. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, startling me. The clerk, an older man with a weathered face, looked up from his magazine. "You all right there, son?" he asked, concern etching his features. You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed, a high, nervous sound that was foreign to my own ears. I'm not sure," I admitted. "I picked up a hitchhiker back on the forest road and he disappeared while we were driving. Is that something that happens around here?" The clerk's face paled, his eyes widening. Without a word, he reached under the counter and pulled out an old, battered photo album. He flipped through it with trembling hands before turning it to face me. "This the fella you saw?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I leaned in, my heart stopping in my chest. There, in faded black and white, was the hitchhiker. Same unremarkable face, same clothes, even the same worn leather jacket. The photo was dated 1973. "He went missing 50 years ago," the clerk said, his voice shaking. "Right on that stretch of road where you picked him up. They never found him, but every few years someone comes in here, just like you, saying they gave him a ride, saying he vanished." I stumbled backwards, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't possible. Ghost stories were just that, stories. They weren't real. I mumbled some excuse to the clerk and fled back to my car. As I reached for the door handle, something caught my eye. There in the back seat was a jacket, a worn leather jacket that I knew with absolute certainty hadn't been there before. I've been home for weeks now, but I can't shake the memory of that night. The hitchhiker's calm voice still echoes in my ears. "I'm going home," he had said. And now I wonder, did I help him get there? Or is he still out there, on that lonely stretch of road, waiting for the next unsuspecting driver to pick him up? I don't know if I'll ever have answers, but one thing's for certain, I'll never drive that road again. And if you find yourself on a dark, lonely highway in the middle of the night, and you see a figure standing by the roadside, keep driving. Don't stop, don't look back, because you never know who or what might be trying to catch a ride home. His name was Jacob. We were inseparable that summer, two gangly 10-year-olds with skinned knees and wild imaginations. Every day after breakfast, we'd race to the tree line at the edge of my backyard, vanishing into our own little world. We built forts, climbed trees, and pretended to be explorers mapping uncharted territory. The forest was our kingdom, and we were its rulers. Jacob was always the braver one. He'd venture deeper into the shadows, daring me to follow. I can still picture his messy brown hair and the gap-toothed grin he'd flash when he found something cool, a weird-shaped rock or a bird's nest. We were unstoppable, invincible, until we weren't. It was late August, that golden time when summer clings desperately to the edges of fall. We were playing hide and seek, as we had 100 times before. I was it, leaning against our favorite oak tree, eyes squeezed shut as I counted. 18, 19, 20. Ready or not, here I come. My voice echoed through the trees as I set off to find Jacob. I searched for hours. The shadows grew long and a chill crept into the air. I called his name until my throat was raw, but the forest remained silent. As the sky darkened, panic set in. I ran home, sobbing, to tell my parents. They called the police. Search parties combed the woods for days. Nothing, not a single trace of Jacob was ever found. The investigation dragged on for months. They questioned everyone, tore apart the forest looking for clues, but it was like Jacob had simply vanished into thin air. Eventually, the case went cold. Life moved on, as it always does. But a piece of me remained frozen in that moment, forever searching. I left for college, built a life in the city. But the woods called to me, a constant whisper in the back of my mind. 20 years to the day after Jacob disappeared, I found myself driving back to my hometown. I told myself it was for closure, to finally lay those memories to rest. But deep down, I think I always knew there was more to it. The path into the forest was overgrown now, barely visible, but my feet remembered the way. As I pushed through the undergrowth, memories flooded back. The sound of Jacob's laughter, the the feel of rough bark under my palms as we climbed. The woods seemed smaller somehow, less mysterious until I saw it, our treehouse. It shouldn't have been there. It was just a rickety platform we'd cobbled together with scrap wood and determination. 20 years of harsh winters and summer storms should have reduced it to splinters. But there it was, looking almost preserved. The wood was weathered, yes, but still solid. Vines had grown up around it as if nature itself was embracing the structure. My heart pounded as I approached the base of the tree. The rope ladder we'd made was long gone, but the notches we'd carved as footholds were still there. With shaking hands, I began to climb. The platform creaked ominously as I pulled myself up. Dust and leaves coated everything, but otherwise it was exactly as I remembered, and there in the far corner was Jacob's old backpack. I hesitated before touching it, half expecting it to crumble to dust, but the fabric was sturdy under my fingers as I carefully unzipped it. Inside, I found Jacob's treasures, the special rocks he'd collected, a battered comic book, and a stack of drawings. My breath caught as I flipped through the pages. I remembered most of them, fantastical creatures Jacob had invented, maps of our imaginary kingdoms. But the last drawing, I'd never seen it before. It showed a dark, twisted figure lurking behind a tree. The proportions were all wrong, limbs too long and bent at impossible angles. Jacob had scrawled a single word beneath it: watching. With trembling hands, I set the drawings aside. That's when I noticed the folded piece of paper tucked into the backpack's side pocket. I opened it, recognizing Jacob's messy handwriting. I saw it again last night. It's not human. I don't think it wants to hurt us, but it's curious. It's always watching. I'm going to try to talk to it today. Don't tell anyone, okay? This is our secret. The note slipped from my numb fingers. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool forest air. What had Jacob seen? What had he been hiding from me? And then, a whisper. So faint I almost missed it, carried on the breeze. My name. I whirled around, heart racing, but the woods were empty, just the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. I scrambled down from the treehouse, suddenly desperate to get out of the forest. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A flash of white against the dark bark of a nearby tree. I approached cautiously, squinting in the fading light. It was a photograph, held in place by a rusty nail. My blood ran cold as I realized what I was looking at. It was me, not as a child, but as I looked now. In the photo, I was standing at the edge of the woods, staring directly at the camera with a look of confusion on my face. I recognized the shirt I was wearing, the same one I had on at that very moment. This was impossible. I hadn't brought any photos with me. This image couldn't exist. A twig snapped behind me. I spun around, heart pounding in my ears. The shadows between the trees seemed to shift and writhe. And there, just at the edge of my vision, I caught a glimpse of something tall and wrong moving through the underbrush. I ran. Branches whipped at my face as I tore through the forest, the sound of my ragged breathing drowning out everything else. I didn't stop until I reached my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I swore I saw a figure standing at the tree line. Long, impossibly thin limbs, a face hidden in shadow. I don't know what happened to Jacob all those years ago, but I know now that he was right. There is something in those woods, something that doesn't belong in our world. And now I think it's noticed me too. I'm writing this from a motel room 3 states away, but I can still feel its eyes on me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to go home again. All I know is that the forest keeps its secrets, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. If you're reading this, please be careful in the woods, and if you hear a whisper on the wind calling your name, run. Don't look back, just run.